Hello everyone, you're listening to Cloud Next, your go-to source for cloud innovation and leaders' insight, brought to you by Global Dots.
It's a typical Monday morning and you're gearing up for another busy week. You grab your coffee and sit at your desk only to find a critical vulnerability has been discovered in your hybrid cloud environment. Your team is working frantically to patch the system, but questions about governance, risk management, and the efficacy of your tech stack keep swirling in your mind. How did this happen? Our guest today is Bronwyn Boyle, the Chief Information Security Officer at PPRO. With over 2 decades of experience in cybersecurity and a passion for resilience and innovation, Bronwyn brings insights that hopefully could prevent these kinds of headaches. We will also deep dive into the impact of AI on security and governance, productivity hacks, practical advice, better mental health support for tech security professionals, altruism projects, and diversity in the tech world. Bronwyn, before we start, what should the audience know about you?
Well, you've just given me such a lovely intro there, Annette. So thank you so much for that. And also thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to join your podcast. Yeah, I think you've pretty much summed it up. So long time tech and financial services and security wonk. Very passionate about all the topics that you mentioned. I kind of feel myself sitting in the intersectionality of cyber trust and safety and kind of that cyber psychology piece. So really keen to just explore the topics and get stuck in.
Great. We would like to start. You come from a pretty rich background and been with some pretty high profile companies. So is there something you can share with the audience around the biggest challenges in managing risk and governance? And what are some of the common pitfalls that organizations face? And maybe your effective strategies to tackle this?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I think I'm pretty lucky to have had a very eclectic and varied career. So I've worked in lots of different types of organizations, from, small startups and scale-ups to, big banks and international financial services companies and everything in between. And yet, regardless of how unique each organization is, you do find some of these consistent trends and kind of challenges that recur. And I think the point around kind of the rapid diversification of our technology stacks, they are introducing very, very increasing challenges for the security folks that are helping to manage these, and also the governance and compliance and risk management folks that are looking to make sure that they are monitored, managed and maintained in a safe and secure way. We're at the moment in a little bit of a perfect storm, I feel, in that, not only is there increasing velocity in all of the kind of the technology and infrastructure that underpins most of the services that we rely on in a digital environment. We're also seeing kind of increased business demands, because companies are being kind of, pushed to innovate harder and faster and present, new and enhanced products to customers who have rightly an ever demanding set of expectations, which is fantastic in that it's great to see that level of innovation, but that comes with increased challenges and increased attack surfaces as well, right? So we have far more to look after and safeguard and act as custodians of than we had previously, kind of around 10 years ago, where it was a much more homogenous and kind of bounded estate that we would have to safeguard. Equally, many organizations now have to do more with less, right? So, we all know that it's tough times out there, right? Cost of living bites across the board, not just for individuals in society, but also, there's a lot of businesses having quite a tough time these days. And that means, kind of challenges on headcount, challenges on the amount of budget that can be marked for investment. And often it can be quite difficult sometimes to make that return on investment business case for things like security, for things like governance and compliance. Let's face it, they don't always sound the sexiest topics, right? And I think as security professionals as well, sometimes we don't always do as good a job as we might in terms of explaining the business value that we can bring. So I think, with all of that, as a kind of a precipice that we're looking over, and then along comes AI as well, right? And that brings amazing opportunities for lots of businesses and a fantastic opportunity to maybe democratize and lower the barrier to entry to kind of code development and technology development. But on the flip side, it's also lowering the barrier of entry to the bad guys, right? And, they don't have to go through governance and risk and compliance processes to use AI, right? They can just get stuck in and they can and they are, So I think we're really seeing the asymmetry in terms of what we can do from defense to attack an increasingly technically proficient cyber criminal and adversary network is kind of really starting to bite.
Totally agree with everything you just said. And actually, that was just like the perfect summary of life as a CISO, actually, in the current age. It's like a massive explosion of the attack surface with a constant requirement to reduce the budget. And there's something, I've been talking about this with a lot of people. In particular, I spoke to Greg Notch, who's the CISO of Expel, which is the SOC as a service managed detection response. And the need for CISOs to be personalities in order to get those budgets. Like, it's not enough to sort of explain the risk. You have to use, more smart techniques in order to pull the budgets out of companies in order to do it. It's definitely an interesting world, and the world of AI is only going to make it like 10 times more interesting.
Exactly.
We jumped into the topic of AI, so let's go that way. It's a buzzword and it affects government and risk management. But how does it work across hybrid environments, and what's your experience of that?
Well, look, it's interesting, right? I find there's many camps at the moment in terms of their views on AI and whether it's new or whether it's always been there and we're just calling it something different, and is it AI or is it machine learning, and lots of kind of academic debates. I think for me, I think the key is yes, we have been using it in some kind of shape or form for quite a while, quite successfully. And again, you mentioned you mentioned kind of SOC as a service and SOC applications. I mean, I think for some time, the types of security orchestration and automation technologies have been using machine learning to kind of winnow out the kind of the false positives, try and kind of reduce that signal to noise ratio for very over beleaguered SOC analysts and try and kind of propel them up the value chain. That said, I mean, there's no doubt about it, generative AI is a game changer, right? I mean, it's changing radically kind of how we interact with computing. It's changing again how the bad guys can potentially weaponize previously existing threat vectors at scale and at pace. And I think the other instance as well is as I mentioned, like the innovations that we're seeing, they take a much longer time to hit the enterprise, right? They really do. So I think just the last few days, like looking at the latest OpenAI, it's not a large language model anymore. It's kind of a large world model, right? It's taking in text, it's taking in images, it's taking in video screening, and I mean that's a very, very powerful innovation. Now, again, many organizations, have the luxury or the functionality and the budgets to be able to set up sandboxes to start experimenting safely with this. Many others don't, right? Or they have, folks who are resistant, or they have also workforces who are challenging kind of around, wanting statements around AI is not coming for their jobs, right? So it's much harder to penetrate into an organization than it is to penetrate outside the organization. And I think this is one of the big changes for me that I see. Like, nearly every other technology shift has happened in the office first before it hit the public, right? So I remember my dad coming back with a computer, back in the H dot and the dot matrix printer and all the rest of it. And it was technology that was given to people in companies, and then they took them home and then it kind of seeded out. We're now in a totally different model, right? Where nearly things are happening in the wild and then they kind of, they get turned into commercial offering. But I think that ability to kind of put some sort of a safe framework in place is really essential. And it all comes down also to understanding the risk, right? So, again, there are very diametric views on AI. Is it just, it's just another kind of element of your SDLC, or, actually, it's something that requires kind of, distinct and unique treatment. And again, I suppose some of those views change whether you're an AI developer of your own models versus are you a consumer of kind of what's publicly available. And again, there would be different controls for both, right? But I think, one very interesting thing that's probably coming home to roost is that it is also lifting a lid on where there might be challenges or gaps in existing security controls, right? So if you're not kind of, looking after your data security, if you're not looking after, kind of the right levels of kind of data leakage controls, all the rest of it, like AI is going to hyper accelerate that threat vector for you.
Yeah, big time. And I, from being in a WhatsApp group, which you know very well, the discussions in there around using AI within businesses, even for text searching inside their organization, creates an enormous problem, because if you pull all of the data in there, then you start asking questions that you shouldn't be able to see the answers to. You shouldn't need like a filter on your AI. Total game changer. And actually, I've seen a surge in people asking for that as a service, because it's so foreign to companies generally to put an AI system in there. AI is a bit like teenage sex. Lots of people are talking about it, but nobody's actually doing it. So to actually set that up is like even an unknown thing, which is totally scary for CISOs, because how can you have something you don't know how it operates, have a third party come in and install it and be confident that you're not going to leak data? It's just like no chance.
Exactly. And, I think it's such a valid point as well. You're also highlighting the fact that, the skill sets to be able to kind of, very effectively manage, maintain, and also kind of, mitigate risks associated with this are, they're not widespread right now, right? So I guess the question is, how do we kind of try and rapidly upskill a workforce, in a completely different domain? And, we saw this a little bit with the cloud explosion, right? A lot of, I'm an old fogey, right? I started back in, security kind of, back in the late 90s, early noughties, it was on-prem environments, right? And then all of a sudden cloud happens and everybody's got to try and, get with the program and learn a different approach. And again, the risks are different. The controls need to be different. I'd argue, I don't know whether we're still as mature as we should be from our kind of evolution as security professionals. We still have gaps, but now AI is kind of, bringing another seismic change, and the pace and the scale of it is far more rapid than I think we've ever seen before.
Yeah, it's funny actually you talk about that, because we do operate in cycles. Because when the internet first arrived, we didn't have WAFs, and then we had to sort that out and do IP limiting and blah blah. And then the cloud came along, and then we didn't know we had S3 buckets open, and we needed cloud protection from the Laceworks and the Weirs and the Orcas and whatever. And I feel like we're on top of that now. I feel like this is just the next thing, right? This is just the next challenge that we have to step up to, and I know we will. I mean, as someone who does a lot of talent scouting, I have been put in front of a sort of, I would call it an AI WAF, basically, which is,
oh, wow.
They're people are already building that stuff. I thought someone must be, and then they stuck me in front of them, and sure enough, they were. And searching for all kinds of things, like hallucinations within the system and extreme content, let's say, and things like that. So it's something we're going to have to just come to terms with, because it's not stopping.
Exactly.
Something else I wanted to come back to that you mentioned was the idea that the hackers don't have ethics or something like that. It's so common. I'd love to get your take on it, but people complain about if you do an email phishing campaign internally to your own people, you get complaints like, oh, people were duped and they felt sad about that. It's like, well, the hacker has no ethics whatsoever. So why should the CISO? What's your experience of that, and what's your view on that?
Yeah, so look, it's a really interesting topic, and again, it's interesting seeing again some of the security awareness companies are now kind of pivoting to kind of a multi-channel mode of phishing, right? So they're no longer just sending the emails; they're looking at kind of again using AI to generate much more realistic phishing scenarios over WhatsApp and text as well, and leveraging publicly available knowledge, which is really helpful, I think. But again, I think if you look at the majority of legacy approaches, they don't quite match the scale and skill of adversaries. And I think that can be really, it's getting quite concerning at this point, because the delta between the comfort blanket you feel because you had a, under 10% click-through rate on your phishing attack simulation versus actually what attackers are going to do, it's becoming bigger every time. But you mentioned a really interesting point there. I do feel very strongly about the fact that, we need to have a no-blame culture, and we need to have openness, and that, my least favorite catchphrase is that people are the weakest link, right? I think people are our greatest line of defense, and I think we need to advocate for them and kind of, trust them, and also empower them to help kind of them stay secure, and also for us to stay secure. With the phishing testing, you're absolutely right. It's one way to absolutely burn the trust that you've generated with other parts of the business and with other kind of C-suite if you don't do it properly, right? So I'm an advocate. Again, every environment is different, right? But I feel as long you need to hold the trust that you've built in a very kind of high regard, and you need to safeguard that, because once it's lost, it's very, very difficult to rebuild.
I like that. I've always disliked that people are the weakest link thing as well.
I hate it.
Yeah, it's sort of true, but it'd be better to say uninformed people are the weakest link, and then it puts the blame on being informed, because I think that's it basically.
Indeed, but I think also, aren't we getting to a little bit of a paradigm shift now? And I appreciate probably we're not necessarily at the kind of the tipping point of this, but it is happening. If you look at the sophistication now that a motivated adversary can generate something that it certainly would fool me. I'll put my hand up and say I'm in a constant state of paranoia, right? Because Are you real, Nesh? Is this real? Is this an AI generated spoof? I don't know. But I mean, I think you're, again, the informing of people is absolutely spot on. But again, we're going to have to be far more critically aware, and kind of, what our eyes and ears are telling us may not be the reality, right? And I think we need to find a kind of a green cross code style way of, validating offline before we trust what we're seeing on our screens.
I totally believe you. And yeah, it's funny that I heard something recently that with the German parliament, basically they won't allow any Zoom calls to have official meeting because they can't be sure the people are who they are.
Wow.
So if they want to have if they want to have a decision from Angela Merkel, she has to be there.
Wow.
Basically.
Wow.
Which is totally makes sense because deepfakes are so good now.
Yeah.
I mean, they're apparently they're deepfaking Biden because he can't make it to the end of a sentence now. But like that is basically the world we're going to get into. And I believe that tech will actually have to come to the solution.
Yeah.
I think you'll have to have at the minute we have end-to-end encrypted chat, right? So allegedly that it's all encrypted between the ends. I think we'll have to have something that says, a little icon in the corner that flashes and says, you're speaking to the real Nesh. We know because we're plugged into the real Neshulator or something. We have to come up with that.
Elon's brain chips, that's what it's all about.
Yeah. After talking about how to put trust in people and gain relationships, telling them all they've got to have a brain chip is probably not going to go down.
Let's not do that. Just sarcasm alert. Sorry.
Yeah. Bronwyn, we can't avoid the subject of women in tech, and I know that you have been at the forefront of the diversity struggle for a little while. We would love for you to share some of your experiences. You don't have to get into names and specifics, but high times and low times. And yeah, what would you like to share with us?
Well, it's interesting, right? We've had this conversation, Ness, and I always appreciate how open you and the Global Dots guys are to kind of supporting diversity in tech. And, people do ask me, does it get a bit boring talking about it? And it's like, sometimes, but you know what? We got to keep talking about it until it changes, right? And I think, again, as somebody, started my career, back in 99, right? I would have come through kind of quite an interesting environment. And there's no doubt about it, it is getting better. But I think, again, some of my more recent experiences would kind of have given me pause for thought. I mean, it is a shame to see that it's still, an issue for so many women in tech, that there's still, maybe challenges on their ability, that there's still kind of problems around, potentially kind of having a kind of a trusted forum, and also can be quite lonely, right? So I had I was talking to an amazing female security engineer from one of the cloud hyperscalers, and she's super talented. She's absolutely, exactly the right type of talent that we need to be proud of and retain and cherish and kind of, safeguard. And she just said to me, Bronwyn, I'm just exhausted. I'm exhausted from representing women and from being the only woman in the room and from always having to fight. And, I know that feeling. I recognize that feeling. It does get a little bit wearying. But I think, it is still an issue, right? And I think certainly for me in security, I mean, the stats speak for themselves. There's still very, very few female CISOs. I remember when I was CISO, my previous CISO role, I remember, that there was a big kind of hoo-ha made about the fact that, there was only 4 female CISOs in the Fortune Top 100 cloud companies, of which, we were one. And when I left, it went down to 3, right? So it's like, it's just sad to see we don't seem to have a pipeline, and we don't seem to kind of also manage to retain women in leadership as much as we should. I also feel again that, things are changing, right? And there's no doubt about it. I mean, it's heartening to see the fact that, genuinely there is a level of care on this and people are leaning in. But I do worry slightly that we haven't quite got it right yet, right? Because we're just not seeing the pipeline. We're not seeing that retention. And it was interesting. I mean, I went to my niece's school kind of graduation thing. And it was really lovely because it's an all-girls school, and they had like about 120 girls who were graduating and doing A-levels, and they all kind of came up and the teachers told the kind of the assembly, where they were going on to study or do apprenticeships or whatever. And only 2 out of 120 were doing technology. Now, that for me, that was a real eye opener for me, because I thought actually we've made tech more accessible. There are more kind of girls and younger women interested. And that was a moment of truth, I think, for me, where I went, look, no, we really have to kind of lean in, and we have to do better on this.
It's somewhat hypocritical or something to be a middle-aged white man in tech talking about how there's too many middle-aged white men in tech, but there just is, basically. And I know the mold can be broken because they've done it in Israel, and I believe probably the reason behind that is through the military, because they have more open access to that, and it feeds into the system. But they have lots of very, very smart, savvy women in tech, and you don't need the military to provide that. You don't have to use that as the mold.
Right, that's exactly.
That, like, the source of the intelligence was women, not the military. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So we have to find a way.
We do. And I think, to your point as well, I mean, that there is so much more we can do to kind of, I don't know, make it more appealing and demystify it. I mean, I did a talk for a group of women sponsored by some of the folks that you know well and we worked with before. Plug out to Lacework and AWS, because they are doing an awful lot in this space. Again, somebody said to me, "Oh, you're the first female CISO I've ever met," and that was, I mean, I was kind of sad to hear that, because there should be far more examples. You were far more proficient than me. But the topic that I spoke on, I did a talk on why Taylor Swift would be a great CISO, right? Because I was like, actually, if you look at so many of the characteristics she has, if she decides she gets bored of being a global megastar, it's nice to know that she has options. She would be a smashing CISO. She's, all the, her storytelling, her leaning into tech, the innovation that she does, and she's proven that she's very good on incident response. And some of the stuff she's had to deal with deep fakes and stuff. And again, loads of people have said to me, "My God, I would never think of security with that lens." And it was a bit silly and a bit cheesy, but it did present security in a way that quite a few women there said they hadn't thought about it before, and we need to find those ways of telling our story better.
Yeah, completely. And I don't think it's a cheesy thing, actually. I think it's like, I think that's quite fitting, because probably Taylor Swift is someone that people would look to just as a sort of pop bimbo. And it's totally not fair, and it helps to sort of level that sort of mindset. And that we know there's, we obviously know there's an issue, but I mean, the mutual group that we're in on WhatsApp, which has something like 320 members in now, it's a complete sausage fest. I mean, it's like, I don't know how many women are in there, but I don't think it's more than like 10 or 15 or something. So,
yeah, and I think the other thing as well is, and I mean, I've had to learn a little bit on this and reflect on my own kind of I suppose, tendencies in terms of communicating. I mean, I'm very happy chatting, but I don't feel as comfortable sometimes in certain types of communication. And so I feel that, again, some of those groups are amazing. They're so supportive, and they're great sources of knowledge and collaboration. But again, they can be a bit intimidating. If you're already feeling like you're a bit of an outsider and you're feeling a little less confident because of that, then it can be even harder to kind of just chip in with kind of a kind of a thought or a suggestion, because you're kind of, your natural inclination is to think you're going to get shot down, and sometimes you are. So.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like large groups of lads going out, just being very laddie, and it's like it's the least possible way to be inclusive is just a group of men all huddling around together. So on that topic, we want to foster inclusivity in our environments, and we want to pull people into organizations. You're a leader in this, you're a talker in this. What can you share to other organizations that they can help promote this or include this? So
I think, back to your topic around kind of being informed, and again, the recognition of this and the fact that it is a topic that folks are kind of, happy to discuss and advocate for, and hopefully walk the walk as well as talking the talk. That's absolutely vital. I also feel, again, there's a few areas in the pipeline that I think we could really target. First of all, is entry-level roles. I mean, I think we are missing huge swathes of talent, either because, again, young women and girls aren't as interested, or also because they're from a non-traditional background and they don't have expensive certs, or they haven't been to university or whatever, so they're not necessarily getting the same access to learning what cybersecurity is all about, but also to kind of even getting into as an entry-level role in certain environments. And I think, that entry-level pipeline is so important to get that right? Because again, we know that women were likely to drop out. So, if we've got a small population to start with, they're also more likely to feel marginalised and less included, and that dropout rate is likely to increase. I think the other areas that we need to kind of lean in on it, there's a very significant drop again in women who are kind of, mid-career, who are choosing to leave technology. And I mean, this is a real kind of, I don't know, I mean, it's something that's been noted not just in security, but in lots of other areas in tech. And again, I think there are multiple factors that are influencing that. But again, I don't know. Apart from kind of talking about the problem, I wish I had more kind of concrete examples of what we're doing to successfully combat it. Now, I have seen examples work really well. I mean, Lloyds Banking Group are a great example of this, right? They have return to work programs for women who've taken career breaks for caring purposes or for other reasons. So they get them back in, they get them brought up to speed with things that might have changed, and they provide a very inclusive and supportive environment to really foster that connection back with the workplace. And that works, right? And again, you're bringing people in who have organizational knowledge, who have also life knowledge and also cross skills potentially that they can bring to bear. I think we need to see that more concertedly applied at a kind of a broader level, at an industry level, because it does seem to work, right? So I think that's huge. And then I think the other area, being a CISO, CISOs are having a bit of a hard time lately, right? So we're a lot of folks are again choosing not to leave. I mean, I think we've all seen those stats about people saying they're either looking for a new job or looking to get out altogether. And, I understand that. You then factor in somebody from a minority, be they female or from, a different ethnic minority or, neurodiverse or whatever, it's lonely already. You can understand why they would feel that's even harder. So I think supporting a pipeline of CISO talents, across different excluded groups would be really helpful.
Wise words, and the dropout rate is quite upsetting. And I know, I know you personally, and I know you told me some of the things in private, and we certainly don't have to go into those in the podcast, but just essentially quite harrowing stories to the, the point where I've been, pretty much shocked and alarmed, and not shocked and alarmed just using those words, but genuinely shocked and quite alarmed that people's behavior would be thusly towards women in the environment. And I think you're right. It's about fostering the pipeline. And I mean, nobody quite knows what the solution is because everybody's facing the problem and we haven't solved it yet. So there's no go-to model of how we solve it. But I definitely think it's on the shoulders of everyone. I think it's it sounds a bit dramatic, but we had the Me Too movement, which kind of stopped people from, pinching girls' bums and doing stupid things like that. And it sort of, and not essentially that shame's the right way to go, but it shamed people into behaving in the correct way. Or, it was a steer to get people to go the right way. We almost lead like a movement like the hashtag Me Too, but for women in tech, like hashtag Me Too Women in Tech, or I don't know. It feels like that sort of moment where it's not really, it's not on the shoulders of the people who want to be in the tech so much as much as the environment needs to change to allow them to come through.
I think that's a really nice way of articulating it. There's a fantastic book called Brotopia by Emily Chang, and the subtitle is Breaking the Boys Club of Silicon Valley, right? And it talks about, again, all of the different elements of the tech ecosystem, from funding and kind of the type of support that female investors or founders get or don't get, down to kind of how they, women experience working in predominantly male tech fields, to even kind of sales and kind of, that whole go-to-market life cycle. And it was a really interesting read for me, actually, because, when I was having kind of tough times, it gave me a better reflection point on kind of what was maybe within my gift versus what might be more kind of systemic. And, again, it's very heartening to have the support of people and the allyship for people. And again, I don't particularly like talking about the bad bits, because who does? But I mean, there's no doubt passionate about it. I mean, a lot of stuff that kind of I and other women have normalized, when you do say it out loud, it's like, that's probably not okay, right? So, I think again, I've seen just very small interventions, but very powerful interventions from, people like you and allies, where they're speaking up and they're speaking out, and, not always taken very well. But I mean, male allyship and support is absolutely foundational and fundamental to actually change the dial. And as you say, change it from within the system rather than, trying to batter our way in from the outside.
And quite interesting, you mentioned the sort of the bros in Silicon Valley. That loops back to the AI problem. The fact that AI has mostly been programmed and built by middle-aged white men, or certainly middle-aged men, if not white. And what biases have been programmed into that as it's been built out. We've sort of exacerbated the problem of the sort of super male mind in the computer.
Right. And not just that also, I mean, again, there's kind of this rumbling, that you see the kind of the top leaders kind of going, we're not really kind of comfortable that it's completely safe, but, the market prevails, right? Market forces demand that we put this out there. And it's like, well, hang on a minute, really, we can decide that ourselves if we try, right? But I mean, it does feel like we're on a bit of a kind of a machine that's kind of making kind of some fairly systemic and epic choices for humanity without necessarily kind of having the lessons learned from where this didn't work out so well. Social media, I'm looking at your direction.
Yeah. No, the wheels are off at this point. It's rolled. The wheels are off. The brakes are off at this point. No, the wheels will come off later.
The wheels are probably coming off.
The wheels are definitely probably coming off as well. Actually, wheels coming off leads us quite nicely to the next topic, because we know that you are heavily involved in raising the subject of mental health support in the tech industry. I actually don't know too much about this already, but would love for you to elaborate.
Yeah, absolutely. So I, again, it's funny how kind of the universe works sometimes. I mean, I was actually having kind of a bit of an old tough time, and I was, and again, you and I were having chats, and you were very supportive, Nesh, so thank you for that. But I was feeling of tapping out of security altogether. I mean, I was kind of done. I was like, you know what, I've given it the old college try, and it's not really for me, and it's just it's wool in the too hard basket, because it's just not my place. And I was at a bit of a low ebb, and actually just, with the magic of serendipity, at the same time, I reconnected with a fabulous chap named Peter Coronius, who many of your listeners will know already. He's a bit of a legend in the world of cyber from Australia. He founded the Cyber Advisories Network, and he's an all-round good egg. And he's got a really fantastic combination of a neuroscience background plus 40 years of cyber skills. So I mean, he knows what he's at. And again, he was really worried about the overall kind of trends of burnout and kind of mental health challenges within cyber. And I was literally like, this is me. It's like you're literally describing my brain right now. And he set up an initiative called Cyber Minds as a not-for-profit initiative to basically support cybersecurity professionals better manage their psychological resilience. And it's founded on a protocol that has been proven, in really gnarly conflict situations and military situations, but it's taking that and situating it in a cyber context. And again, it's not brain surgery or rocket science, but it is brain science. It's focusing on mindfulness. It's focusing on kind of, taking a step out of that massive fight or flight mode that so many of us are constantly in, with constant kind of adrenaline and, just kind of coursing through us at all nights of the day. And, it's just designed to try and reset our mental activity into more of that steady state where we can make better cognitive choices, where we can regulate our emotions, where we don't feel so overwhelmed. And again, I mean, I feel like I'm hugely passionate about it, partly because, it was a really, huge kind of saving for me. It's really changed how I approach things. I was really struggling to kind of keep my myself regulated, shall we say, emotionally. And I found this a really great help. And I think the idea of scaling that out and making sure that, it doesn't matter if you're in a breach situation, you've got the tools in your backpack to be able to kind of take a step out and get off the hamster wheel and kind of allow that cognitive reset.
Yeah, it's it's quite amazing. When I had a burnout and a few years ago, was just way too much on, way too many direct reports, way too much traveling, way too much everything, and just project after project after project. and ended up having a panic attack on the underground. Thought I was having a heart attack, had to get myself into the hospital to see what was going on. And then as I recount all the things that I'm doing to the doctor while he's asking me the question, the light bulb is going off. It's like, how many hours do you work a week? And do you do this? And do you check your emails out of work? And do you blah, blah, blah? And you kind of realize that, okay, now I see. But I think it takes quite a large wake-up moment. I think it basically takes most people a panic attack or some sort of burnout to realize they're going to burn out. And actually, there's a classic meme. It's like, recharge your batteries at 80%, 80% used, not 100% used. That way you won't reach the end. And it's learning that.
And I really feel you, Nash, because I think, again, it's more common, again, the more you talk about this, the more you realize, so many other people have gone through it. And I think, taking a step back also and looking at the workforce of the future, it's not been an easy run for Gen Z, right? They have been, through COVID, they're living in a completely different digital world to us, right? There's much higher levels of anxiety. And now we're saying, come and join us in cyber. It's a great career opportunity. But we're not really kind of setting them up for success in terms of that psychological resilience and that kind of mental health support. So I feel like it's, we have to do something different, right? If we're going to kind of keep this as a sustainable career and we're going to kind of look after ourselves and each other, we need to kind of really lean in on this and keep talking about it as well, because, and again, more power to you. You're a great advocate for, that openness and transparency, and you'll enable other folks to hopefully talk as well and feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, thank you. That's very kind. And I think it's happening to way more people than people would believe, because people aren't talking about it. Something that I found when I mentioned it, suddenly 3 or 4 colleagues came and spoke to me and said, "Oh, I'm really glad you said something, because also that's happened to me, but I just was too scared to come forward." And I think then the businesses also, they don't back it up. You have these HR welfare programs where it's like, we want the best out of people, and they'll put a ping pong table and a snooker table in the office. But right. That's not mental health, basically. That's a ping pong table.
Exactly. And you're absolutely spot on there, Nash. I remember, again, seeing where this is done well. I was working at Lloyd's Banking Group when their new CEO at the time, Antonio Horta Osorio, he came into role and he was going great guns, and then, he had to step out for a few months, and, again, quite a public, CEO figure saying, look, I'm stepping out for mental health reasons. He came, took a few months out, came back and smashed it for years, did such a great job, which was fantastic, but really changed the dial in terms of openness and kind of giving permission for people to talk about it, and really, again, also put very, very forward thinking and very, very kind of positive measures in place, not ping pong tables, just actually proper support, which was really good to see.
Yeah, I think walking the walk and talking the talk, basically. It's sort of, it's been given a lot of lip service up until now, both culturally and in workplaces. I think probably it's time for the workplaces to step up.
Exactly.
We got a couple of sort of questions in closing. The one we love to give people is what I now call the DeLorean question, which is, if you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of professional advice, what would it be?
I think it would be to be myself, because I think it's probably something I'm only really kind of leaning into in my later years as a middle-aged albidi. When I was starting my career, I was forever told that I didn't have enough gravitas and stuff like that, and it was like, oh my God, you just had to pretend to be an elderly gent to kind of try and get anybody to take you seriously. And that idea of being authentic, or kind of servant leadership, or being empathetic or compassionate, was just like off the table. It was a massive sign of weakness. And so I really kind of, it was just the environment. It was the time, it was just the way things were at the time. But I think it did maybe hold me back a little bit more from kind of being kind of me in situations, which first of all is bloody taxing, right? Because you end up masking all the time, and it takes a lot out. And I'm sure my hamster and my brain wheel would have been far more productive not having to deal with that bit. But also, again, you kind of perpetuate a particular mode of being and doing that also excludes other people who want a different way of engaging, right? So I kind of feel it was I'm so much more comfortable now just kind of doing my thing my way, and again trying to kind of drive positive leadership as much as I can.
I think that's an awesome piece of advice to anybody, whatever the hell you're doing anywhere, is to just be yourself. I mean, I can't think of a more delicious piece of advice. It's something I tell people, new people we're onboarding, I tell them every single time. They want to know how we sell or how we do this or how we evaluate tech and blah, blah. They always, lots of it is around like the how you do things. I'm like, I have found my own way. You find your own way. Like it works for me because I'm me. It's not going to work for you to repeat my lines, but yeah, it's that's gorgeous. And then in closing, would you have a few tips for women looking to make an impact in the tech world?
Absolutely. And I think, first and foremost, get involved, right? We need, your voices. We need you in the community, and I think particularly now as well, Nesh, I'm really interested in what, the younger generations we can learn from them. Their approach to technology is completely different, right? They've grown up in a completely different way, outside of the office, my dad giving me his old office equipment, it's been a completely different model for them. So getting involved, and finding their niche in security. It takes a village. We have such a broad discipline, and it's one of the beauties of our profession. There are so many different avenues people can take. So, explore things with an open mind. Try and probe all the different elements that you can get involved in. And if you're somebody who enjoys coding, awesome. If you're somebody who's more philosophical, we need so much support on cybersecurity and ethics. There's cyber psychology disciplines. There's the legal side. There's the risk side. So it's so much more richer than I think maybe the standard kind of what's the word, like like kind of perception of security as kind of somebody hacking into something, or the kind of the green screen with the numbers. So yeah, keep an open mind, get involved, and also connect with the network, because there is a really wonderful community out there who want to do good and who want to support.
That's super great. And I'm so glad that you are still in this network. I'm so glad you didn't tap out. You're such a great personality to have in the tech community, and a real great spokeswoman for this movement of mental health, women in tech, and just sort of changing our environment that we're faced with at the moment. So, Bronwyn, it's been totally awesome to have you. Really, really a pleasure having you on the show. Any closing words from your side?
No, just thanks for having me, and keep doing the great work. It's just a really, really good avenue to get to hear from different perspectives. So thank you for having me join today.
Thank you so much. This episode was produced and edited by Daniel O'Hanna and Thomas Morvenson. Sound editing and mixed by Bren Russell. I'm Ganesh the Awesome, and if you're ready to deep dive and start transforming the way you approach cloud practices and cybersecurity strategies, then the team and myself at Global Dots are at your disposal. We are cloud innovation hunters, and we search the globe looking for the future tech solutions so we can bring them to you. We've been doing it for over 20 years. It's what we do, and if I don't say so myself, we do it pretty well. So have a word with the experts, don't be shy, and remember that conversations are always for free.